Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So today's video, we are discussing Taken to Voraxia by Elizabeth Stevens. I did film a really long and rambling update when I was at about 35%, and I am going to include that clip here, but for your benefit, I am going to recap some of what I said in that clip to save us some time and some rambling, okay? So the premise of this book, Taken to Voraxia, is that in some distant future, a ship of humans has crashed onto an alien moon and are not doing great. And then the local alien population comes to them and makes like a deal, an arrangement, whatever, for some protection. In exchange, these local aliens, who are kind of the bad guys, are going to come and like hunt and claim a certain number of the women from the human colony. And by like claim, I really mean just like come and abuse them sexually and then leave. And this is not a pact that the humans, they were like coerced into doing this because they needed the protection, and it's not something that they want to be doing. So the book opens, and it's been a while since this was established. It's been I would say at least like 20 years or so since this was established, and the book opens on it's the day that the bad guys are going to come to this human colony, and our main female character is Miari. She is actually half human, half alien. She is one of the resultant offspring of the first time that this like ritual or the hunt happened, and and she is one of only two hybrid people who exist. Except for this time, when the bad guy aliens show up, they also have with them this new person who it turns out is our main male character, and he is the Raku. He is like the king of the solar system or whatever, who's here. And he recognizes her immediately as his true fated Xiveri mate, and wants to take her with him and like have her be as part of his life. But she's like too young, like she's not eligible to like participate in the hunt or whatever for another rotation, aka 3 years. So he is like, I'm coming back for you, and he leaves. And so he does come back, and he doesn't understand why she's not like responding to him the same way. Like he doesn't understand why she doesn't have this same like pull toward him, this force inside her that is pressuring them to get together. And so he is finding that she's really resistant, and that she doesn't trust him. She doesn't want him. She is not wanting to come with him. And so the two of them have to sort of make deals and negotiate the terms of how their relationship will proceed. So that is the premise and the setup for this book. And I'm going to go ahead and insert my clip and thoughts and feelings at the 30% mark here. And then I will come back at the end for my final thoughts and feelings. There are timestamps below. Feel free to jump around. And so what I think is so interesting about this is that it's an unclear time in the future. And so it's like her friend, she makes comments about being Muslim, being Jewish, being Christian. Like she makes like reference to multiple different gods this way. There's commentary that's been put forward about the like pretty, like how pretty the girls are who are being presented to these aliens. And one of those factors is skin tone, and like the darker, deeper the skin tone is, like the more pretty. And our main female character, her skin tone is like reddish or like vermilion because she's half alien, and so she views herself as like really ugly. And there's obviously commentary about sort of consent and the horrors and trauma that these women have gone through, and what they've had to survive. But what I think is one of the things that I think is so interesting is that one of my complaints in other alien romances is that I never have felt, or I frequently feel, that the alien culture or like their perspective is like too human. Like it's like a very human like culture or the aliens themselves are very human like, but like they have magical tattoos or like gold eyes or something, or like they're just like super strong. And I'm just like, okay, like, this is not like alien enough. That's frequently my complaint, is it's not alien enough, or that like their cultures are like too different. And something that I am sort of appreciating, I guess, with this is that the culture is very different. Our main male character, his title is Raku, like he's the king, that's his title. And in his perspective, his like expectations for what their relationship are going to be are very different from what, like, from the perspective that Mieri is coming from. And the blurb does discuss about, does mention that this is like enemies to lovers. And I think that it's been interesting because like it's obvious that Raku cares for Miari and wants her to be safe, and like he values her because of like, because she's his mate, but like he is not making any effort to try. So far he has not really made any effort to like try to get to know her, and it takes a long time for him to, not a long time, but he doesn't immediately realize like what she's gone through or understand her position on things. And I mean, also, to be fair, Miari doesn't understand like his position on things, and like they're not really being communicative. And to some extent, there is a little bit of like a Deus Ex Machina here, where the element inside them that recognizes who the other person is as their fated mate is like driving them to like just like these like this like extreme high levels of lust. But what I think is so interesting is that there are these like deals being made. There's this like the communication that is happening between our two main characters are negotiations. Like she realizes for the first time in her life that she actually has some sort of power over one of these alien people, and like she can pretend, and that she has something that he wants, and so she is willing and able to like make those negotiations for her friends, for her colony, for her other humans that she cares about. And I'm really enjoying it. And what I think is so interesting is that like he is making accommodations for her. Like he thinks to himself, well, I'm the Raku, like I would never do this with anybody else, but because she's my like mate, like I would potentially do this for her. But then like there's other things that he is like, well, no, I am the Raku, like it is the way it is. And yet he doesn't explain any of that to Miari, and she is also at the same time like coming at things from a perspective of viewing this person, this male who is now in charge of her essentially, as like almost as like an overlord kind of a situation, where she has made a deal with the devil and kind of sold herself into the situation to try to protect people that she cares about. And so she is like, he is viewing her as like cunning and vicious by manipulating the situation the way she can, and yet he is also like taken over. I don't know, it's super interesting. And even when I was just at the part where I've paused to make this update, they're in a new situation where I thought they were kind of like, okay, we've gotten through the initial miscommunication and like, you know, resolution and tension, and like here we're on an okay page, and like we're gonna be able to proceed forward like on the path we've taken, or like, you know, like we're on an uneasy truce, and like now we're gonna proceed. And like the situation that I'm reading right now, he says, oh, okay, well, you know, what feels to you, the reader, because you're identifying with Miari, even though she's like half alien, half human, she's been raised amongst all these humans. So you, the reader, are kind of, or I at least am identifying with Miari, and she's basically asking for something that is like common decency. Like she's asking for like food, you know, and he's like, okay, well, like let's negotiate about this. And it's such a power move between them in a way that's not hurtful yet, maybe. I don't know, it's got dark themes, but like it's so clearly something that he like, you know, he's trying to get what he wants by negotiating with her, and it's the position that he's always been in by being essentially like royalty and having to be the king and like make these decisions. And it's such a part of what he has to do and what she will have to do as his like mate and someone who stands by him, and he doesn't understand her perspective, and it's really really good. I'm really enjoying the fact that we are seeing all these cultural differences between these two characters, and you're just kind of, you the reader are thrown in and just kind of having to figure it out as you go. But I'm really enjoying that the miscommunication elements are not just like brush past, no problem. I'm liking that there is some push and pull here, and I want to see both of them come into their own, because I think also a lot of times in other alien romances, the guy alien, especially when he's like found, like thought it would never happen to him, but he's found his true mate, like he tends to, I feel, kind of just like roll over and like throw his own cultures and customs out the window in deference to our main female character. And I'm kind of hopeful that Raku won't do that, and it really will be a like learning to trust each other situation. I've blathered on long enough, especially since I'm only at 35%. I'm just really enjoying this because I'm feeling like it's quite different from some of the other myriad of alien romances I've read. And I don't love some of the writing choices, some of the description choices. There are some certain word choices that I'm like, oh, not what I would have chosen. But yeah, so far I'm intrigued, and the actual like content is shining stronger than some of the actual like detail word for word writing elements. So I definitely can't wait to dive back into that title, and stay tuned for my final thoughts. So, despite the glowing feelings I had at the 30%, it was not very much further. It was like right around the 40 to 50% mark where this book really took a strong left turn, in my personal opinion. Even though there was all this push and pull between our two main characters and the setup at that like 35% mark, and it was really interesting, pretty much shortly thereafter, the Raku, the main male character, he kind of officially starts to fully realize her perspective, like that she has come from this colony that has been abused and hurt, and that she views herself as this, as like his whore, like that she has to trade what he wants, what should be like between them because they're mates, for what she wants, and protections for her friends and for herself. And he does not like this. He does not want, he wants her love, even though he doesn't have that word for it. And so he basically like makes this big speech. This is kind of spoiler territory, but I don't care. I have to talk about it. He makes this big speech about how like he will let her go and that she will have freedoms, and he wants her by his side. She's going to be his queen, but that like if she doesn't want anything to do with him, he will respect that. And then he walks away. And then it's 3 days later, they don't have not had any interactions during that time, and she comes to him and she's like, actually I like you. And then the rest of the book is just a total cliche, like, and we were in love. And I was like, but why? You didn't communicate. You like, what happened here? Like, there was, it just literally felt like the author was like, and it's about the right time in the book, flip a switch, and then what? They were just like suddenly in love, and it made no sense to me. And I was very frustrated because it felt that all of that really interesting dynamic of push and pull and sort of like miscommunication or struggle to see the other person's perspective, it just like disappeared. Because even though they still didn't see eye to eye, they still had to work on their communication and work to understand what the other person was saying. They were like, yeah, but we're doing it when we're so in love. And I was just like, but why? It was really frustrating. And finally, like, they kind of have a conversation. They've like kind of declared that they have their feelings. Like, it felt to me like, okay, this is the part of the book where it's going to eat where it's like, it's time for like the third act breakup or the end. And the problem was, it was like at like 55%, maybe 60%. And I was like, how can there be still so much left of this book? And so the whole last 35-40% of the book was a whole bunch of dramatic plot that was kind of plopped in, and fighting and action, and it just kind of made the pacing odd. And yeah, so ultimately, the first third of this book I felt was doing very different things from what I would typically have seen in an alien romance. I thought it was interesting. I thought the power dynamics and the setup of this relationship between our two main characters was super intriguing. I wanted to see how they were going to navigate this. And then like the middle third was just kind of like didn't really make a ton of sense. They weren't really interacting, and then it was just a flip switch, and then they were suddenly together and happy and in love. And then the last third of the book was like all of the drama and action, and we just threw in a whole bunch of like plot for reasons that are sort of unclear. So let's get into it. Structurally, like as a book, as a composition, as a piece of writing, I struggled with this book because of what I was just describing, and some of that has to do with like the pacing throughout the book. There was times where like scenes would just drag and drag and drag, and there were other times when a whole bunch of stuff would happen and I was like, what happened there? I want more of that. I think there was an attempt at world building, but and like I said in that clip, I do feel that the Raku comes from this very different culture, but I would have really appreciated time spent for the Raku to like explain things to Miyari and kind of be like, well, in my culture, there's da 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 da, and like this is different, and these are the expectations I will have of you as my queen, and like that would have functioned to build out his culture and build out the world building of him and the aliens and the setup and the government, and like all of that could have been done maybe as a little bit of an info dump, but like in an organic way to instruct this woman who he wanted to be his queen. And it would have also functioned to give you, the reader, a whole bunch more information. And it's like, it never really happens. There is a lot of verbiage and vocabulary that is used to describe multiple components of the Raku's culture and his beliefs, and yet a lot of that isn't really defined and you're kind of like left to context clues, which is fine. I didn't have a ton of issue with that. I thought it was okay. But I do something that I saw in the reviews and that I felt for sure was this element of the words that were kind of made up by the author to describe the various things of the world, and also the sort of naming convention of a lot of our characters. While interesting, it just went a little bit too hard, in my opinion. The main male character, Raku, is not technically his name. It's like his title. Like he is the Raku. He is like the king, and he has a name that he was given like at birth, but then like sometimes he says, at one point he says, oh, like that's your slave name. Like he thinks it's kind of shameful that Miyari has a name instead of a title. And yet like there's another part where they say, well, we don't keep slaves. And I was like, well, then why do you call it like your slave name? Like I understand it's an element that is used to pay respect to people, but everyone's titles are very frequently like, this is super interesting in a cultural way. Like he is Raku, and then his mate will become Rakukana, but then like other people who are kind of under him but like advising to him have like Bo Raku and Vo Raku and like Ixriyaku, and like so it's like the Raku is associated with their title, which is sort of used as their name. But it became, and then like their mates or their siblings or their parents were sort of like associated with that. And so it became a lot. It was really sort of clunky to try to handle, in my opinion. I struggled to kind of keep characters straight. And because there was so much use of these made up words that I was not totally clear, I sometimes struggled with like the actual language and verbiage that was being used to just comprehend things. I also think structurally it needed a little bit more editing, like at sort of a big level, to kind of fix some of those pacing issues and to address how like they went from being not communicating and struggling to being suddenly in love. Okay. But also on a very like minute sentence level, I felt that there were certain times when I was reading something and then it almost felt like a sentence had been cut out, because it seemed like they were like, and he strode down the hallway in the room, he did it, and I'm like, oh, he's already in the room? Like I thought he was in a different building. Like, and so I felt that there were times when a little bit of it was just a little clunky. It needed to be a little bit smoother to follow actions and to like kind of just keep up with what was going on. So I think that the writing just needed a little bit more like polish or something. I loved the attempts at the world building and the different cultures. I thought it was very different than human culture, which I thought was really great. I liked how the description of both the Raku as well as many other alien creatures were they felt different. They felt like they had their own cultures. They felt like they had like their own descriptions, and they were different. But I also wanted a lot more of that, and I had questions about the world building, and I just was kind of, I didn't feel that the writing conveyed quite the extent of coolness that could have been present. And I also saw one or two complaints in the reviews that were talking about how this like wasn't sci-fi enough. And I will say that like Miari is presented to be this like like it says in the blurb, I'm an inventor, a mechanic, a tinkerer, and yet we never see her doing that. Like there's one or two times when she's like, oh, I invented this thing that I'm just gonna pull out of my pocket, and that's just gonna like be exactly what we need in this scene, and then it's never brought up again. And so I think it would have been super interesting to have that be a more prevalent part of her personality, or for her to kind of, there was really only like one scene where she's like, you know what, like I'm in a tough spot, let me see if I can use my smarts and my tinkering abilities to kind of like build something, take this thing apart, build something new that will help me in the situation. Like I loved that. I thought that was great. And that was in the first third. And then it like never comes up again. And so I think that there could have been cool technology and science fiction elements that were involved later on, and I felt like they just kind of fell out, and it was a missed opportunity to have our main character, the inventor, like invent cool stuff or kind of like MacGyver things, you know. So yeah, after the like 50% mark, I felt that the relationship and all of the components of what was going on between our two main characters, just was really felt a lot more cliched and similar to other books that I've read in alien romances, and that was kind of a little bit of a letdown. I thought that the very last chunk, where it was full of all this action and the introduction of another species and like sort of what they were trying to do, and cause problems. I thought that was very interesting, because it was interesting to have action like at the end of the book like this. It dragged on too much and was kind of made the book feel a little unbalanced. But I strongly suspect that like bad guy who shows up and does a bunch of stuff at the end of the book is going to get his own book. So it's kind of interesting that they're like vilifying him in this book, and then he's going to get his own romance and ostensibly not be a bad guy in his own book later. So that was kind of an interesting element. I did like seeing Raku kind of be a king, and he like has a council and he talks to them, and he has to like make decisions. So I liked seeing that. And then later he actually includes Miari because she is his queen, and I liked that. And I also like that they include her human friend, and it's like a discussion about, hey, what can we do to like help these humans and give them rights? And it was like, wow, okay, great, like we're making good steps here, you know. So I liked those elements. I liked also that we got to see that friend Xiveri, and Miari got to keep that friendship kind of like throughout the course of the book. And I liked seeing little hints at some of the other side characters who will be getting their own future books. There was also an interesting element where our main characters, like whatever his species is, the Voraxians, they don't have so much like facial movement to express themselves emotionally or their thoughts and feelings, but they have colors that kind of like, you know, like blushing frequently will like make your skin change colors. Like they have that sort of thing where different colors will show up on their face to express their emotions. And I thought that was kind of an interesting component. It's never super thoroughly explained as to like what the colors mean. And Raku, being the king, is like got a great poker face and is able to like repress his colors. I thought it was a cool idea. I would have liked for that to also be explored a little bit more. And then yes, the couple of things that I didn't really like have been stuff that I've already been talking about, sort of the inherent word choice and construction of sentences, and felt like sometimes sentences got dropped, that kind of thing. I felt like it was hard to keep track of all the different titles of characters. I think to some extent it was not unreadable, and it was not like such a contributing factor to make me DNF the book. I just think that it took a little bit more effort than I was expecting, and there were occasional times when I was like, I don't have enough context clues to really know what that is. Hopefully it's not important. And yes, I felt like there were a few plot holes. I don't know if I actually mentioned this, but like the timing was weird. In the book they talk about rotations, like she has to be a certain number of rotations old, or he would come back in a rotation, and I didn't really understand what that length of time was. It says in the blurb, literally the very first sentence, that it says every 3 years, and what's weird to me is that like they meet the very first time and she's like too young, and the indication is that she's 18 and she needs to be at least 21, and so he comes back like one rotation later, which is 3 years. In that amount of time, he has done zero research and learned nothing about how humans function, or anything about that colony, or anything about like his underling who had like originally made that deal, and like what they'd been doing on that colony. He learns nothing about human anatomy or anything like that, or anything about his mate. He's just like, all right, I'll see you in one rotation, and then it's just like, and he comes back and he's like, man, it was tough to be away from her. Has done nothing. And she meanwhile has had 3 years essentially to like come up with a plan of what to do, to invent something, or like make a plan. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it felt more like he was gone for like 48 hours, not for like 3 years. So the timing was kind of weird. It felt like there was therefore some plot holes, kind of just because it didn't make a ton of sense. And then when he comes back and gets her, and then they are together for like the rest of the book, like that amount of time is quite short, like maximum 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, so this really is instant love, because they've barely interacted in this amount of time. And so yeah, I didn't really love the instant love. And I'm all for your fated mate to like bring this response out in you, but also it was a little like, she just was like, oh, I actually do like you, so like let's be together. And I was like, but why? You haven't had any conversations together. So that was extremely frustrating for me. I really struggled to kind of come up with a rating for this book, because I felt that it was so kind of hit and miss, and I've hopefully done an okay job in this review discussing some of the pros and cons and things that I liked and things that I didn't like. I am interested enough in this series and in this world to at least try the next book in the series, but this one ultimately kind of was a letdown despite such a promising start. So let me know if you have read anything in this series or read anything by this author before, and if you have any thoughts and feelings on anything that I just said, because this is going to turn out to be a long video, and I apologize for that. But yeah, thanks so much for making it all the way here at the end, and wish you all the best, and see you soon. Bye.